Hello and welcome to Deep Dives with New Perspectives. I'm Michael Bartlett and this is my astrological birth mate.
Merrylin LeBlanc. Both of us are Aquarians. Michael has already had his birthday in January. Mine is coming up on February 8th. I'm sharing it with the impeachment trial of Donald Trump. Now, to make that a real birthday present, I have to contact a few Republicans and say, please give me a birthday present. So,
Give our country a
give them my
birthday
apologies.
present.
I
Well, and
wouldn't
it's
say
also,
about most people, but yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in addition to it being your solar return, which our birthdays are, right? It's the time of year when the sun returns, usually within a degree or two, because sometimes it isn't necessarily the same day as our actual birthday. It might be a day before, a day after, like I just said. But you're having another return. What other planetary return are you having? Coming at some point soon.
Well, at some point very soon, Venus is returning to my natal chart. Venus is in Aquarius. A lot of activity in Aquarius. The two planets that are always close to the sun, Venus and Mercury, are both in Aquarius, and Venus in about 2 or 3 days. I haven't really worked that out exactly, but more than that. What's today? The second? I'd say probably towards the end of, well, the beginning of next week, because on Friday she's at 6 degrees. She has to get to 10 degrees, rounded up 9 plus of Aquarius to have a Venus return. And I'm going to have a second Mercury return soon because Mercury has already been over the past few weeks, my Mercury, and it's going back and it'll go back over it. It's going over it while it's retrograde 3 times. So interesting things are happening for me on that information level and communication level.
Well, it's funny, I think, we talked obviously last week about kind of all things Aquarius, but obviously we're going to delve into it a bit more today because we're having said, like you said, such a focus on it. And of course, the stellium gets even stronger as the month develops. I think on the 19th, the moon's being added, and I think we'll have five planets in Aquarius. So it's going to be quite a focus, and I find it's one of the very interesting signs. It's the last air sign, but it has to do something with, I think, about a losing of ego. It looks across the aisle, it sees Leo over there, it goes, oh, I'm not that. But in its head, it kind of is. Aquarians can kind of be a legend in their own mind, I think, because we're so far, we're usually thinking somewhere up there about these lofty ideas. But it's like it doesn't want to be as far as out there because it understands that there's a price to be paid in blindly following the Pied Piper, right? That's I think an aspect of the polarity with the Aquarius Leo is at a certain point, like Aquarius has to pull away, it has to pull the air away from Leo to give itself breathing room to understand, what is the right thing to do? How much of my energy should be going towards other people? What sort of energy goes towards helping myself? How do we get along better? We're seeing, what an amazing shift. Just a few months ago, our lives were bombarded on a daily, hourly, minute basis about Trump, 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 Trump. And now, right, there's this breath of fresh air, this kind of like, oh my God, we are all in this together.
Yeah, yes, there is. And there, with Mars in Taurus, which is a sign that represents a square to Aquarius, I have a little antsiness for some quick action. But I mean, and there are things being done. I'm not dissatisfied, but I'm going, okay, you can compromise so much and then you have to go ahead and do it. And that's where we're at. But getting, that what you were saying about Aquarius and that kind of independence that you were bringing out reminds me again how Aquarius is associated with, well, it's really Uranus, I believe, that's associated with the full the Fool card in the Tarot. And I'm reminded, am I right, or is it Aquarius? I haven't looked at the Tarot for a while. Um, but it's that idea of, I can do anything I want to do. I can even walk off a cliff and see what happens.
I can
And
fly.
that is that idea of freedom. And I was thinking about freedom today too, in terms of people that, refuse to wear a mask in public. It's my right to do what I want to do, kind of thing. Um, and it just made me ponder, wait a minute. Freedom has its limits. And I'm just thinking, are we actually free to be born? I mean, just start at the beginning. how how you and I were both raised in Catholicism, and there's this whole notion of free will that humans have. And I don't know to what extent that equates to the soul having free will, but I think that's sort of where it begins, where the soul says, I I I want to have a certain kind of experience. And I've read about, a near death experiences when there's one guy, Alexander is his last name, who's written quite a bit about near death experiences. He's a neuroscientist, neurosurgeon of sorts, who had an experience and wrote about it. And and actually, one of the things I recall from one of his books, because he wrote a book all about consciousness too, which I found fascinating, and um, where some of the people that he had met, and there are these circles of people who get together and share their near death experiences. Okay, and one of the things that came out was how some souls, I'm going to call the people that, are the entity of us that chooses to come into, to incarnate, to come into the human body on the earth sphere, um, had agreements with people, to play out certain roles so that they could experience something that they wanted to experience, like a woman who had been, like personified as the absolute beauty, and everybody stepped aside for her and bowed to her in one life and treated her just, with kindness, and anything she wanted she got and stuff. And she decided on a soul level and another, in between, that she wanted to be able to experience what it was like not to be treated like that. And so somebody who was very dear to her agreed to play that role. And yeah, and so you have to kind of, look at characters going. I mean, for example, let's take the man who has sucked up all the air of 2020 and before. And, what might he have been agreeing to on a soul level?
Well, it's interesting because what I was continually struck by throughout this was like how many of my friends would constantly get into this charged battle about anything that came out of his mouth. And it's like, like at a certain point, like my experience was like at a certain point, you can't expect much out of a toddler, other than temper tantrums and look at me, and that, he displayed that over and over again. So it's like this thing of stepping into, understanding. I mean, in a way, it's really kind of neat when you take it back to just the elements. It's like taking the air out of the room. Like when there's a fire person in there, it's literally, there's no, people talk about like they're not being able to breathe, or being like burned or singed or overheated, or it's actually interesting when we can feel it on that cellular level. I mean, we always talk about these things on like on this ideological level, but the truth is these elements are the true building blocks of the world, the physical world we're living in which these spiritual bodies are living. And so oftentimes we end up feeling like that. So, I think the hardest thing for Leo to do is to learn to self-regulate its flame. right? I mean, because, and that's what's so great with, I think, acting. And I think, it's interesting. I see like a lot of actors have fifth house chirons. And I think this interesting thing where they're stepping into these different characters. And I think that's what it is like. What is it like to have big bravado? What is it like to be soft and meek? What is it like to burn the flame along the continuum and with different colors and with, using different elements and things in a way that has, the full range of expression? Because I agree, like you, like what you're talking about is like almost what we talk, you and I've talked about before, the Michael teaching. And it
Right.
talks about these dyads, like a mother-daughter dyad or master-slave or these different things about getting to experience what it's like on each end of it. Like I was told I've had many lifetimes where I was really wealthy, but I go, and then the next time I'm like, oh well, what would it like to be poor? So it's like being the prince in the castle and the pauper at the gate, and understanding what it is to be experiencing that. So what am I doing this lifetime? CFO for a homeless shelter, right? I'm here helping, to make sure that other people don't have to sit there outside the gate, that everyone gets to have their own castle.
Totally appropriate. Well, the thing, elementally, we started out with Aquarius, and Aquarius being this air sign. Air, of all the four elements, is in some ways, I don't know, the most pervasive. It goes everywhere. It's not contained unless you're a scientist and, putting oxygen into a tank and sealing it and having a valve to release it. But it goes everywhere when it's free, when it's not messed with. And so with, with fire, we are using the opposite there. The fire actually thrives on the air. It because without air, I mean, I have two wood burning stoves in this house, and without air, that fire doesn't last very long at all. So it needs the air to keep going. And so there's a balance kind of relationship that you're talking about when there's too much of something. And so, is there ever too we have Jupiter also in Aquarius, and I know, like, this week Venus is going to meet up Saturn, but next week she's going to meet up Jupiter. And one of the expressions of that, Jupiter being a fiery planet in terms of its association, fire and water associated with Sagittarius and Pisces. But it's funny, it's the largest planet that we have too in our solar system. Because in a way, is there too much air? And maybe, how does what do you think of that symbolism? I mean, how does air become too much? I mean,
Well, maybe, to be honest, I mean, one thing I get that when the Space Weather Station, I'm on their little email list,
mhm.
and it's interesting some of the things that come through. And so they talk about solar flares, and one of the ones that popped up, I love it because it's like one of those things that my little Scorpio man can get flipped out about really easily. Like, oh my God, then this can happen, the sky's falling, the sky's falling. One of them are these, coronal explosions or something, these things that can come out and actually basically kind of, if it was to hit the earth just the right way, it could actually basically just like wipe out our atmosphere like that. And that would be, I don't know if I would call that too much air, but what is the air? What is that which is outside of our atmosphere? Because Jupiter's one of the gas giants, right? I mean, I don't remember like how big it actually is, but I mean, there's a lot more of it that is gaseous that we're seeing than what the actual body is, like a lot of the outer planets.
Right. There, yeah. Well, and that whole it's an interesting thing because just in the use, and astrology isn't the only system that uses these elements. Are we really thinking of the elements as they relate to the Earth and the Earth's atmosphere, or does outer space actually become part of it? And
Very
but
egocentric.
Yeah. How egocentric do we become with air at all in any event?
Right.
And but the thing is, it's the energy of the air signs of Aquarius, Gemini, and Libra that actually, and I'm not saying that the scientists, have they have a lot, they usually have air connections or something, but it's the air energy that actually comes up with the ideas and the theories that take us out into space. I mean, we are capable, I mean, we have sent probes that don't come back, that have gone to what we know of the outer limits of not only of our solar system, but they've actually picked up uh, planetary energy in other galaxies. So, how is that?
And the
How
interesting
do you explain that astrologically?
I don't know. And how do you explain that when they're sending those probes out, it's usually when there's also some sort of like each time there's been like a significant Jupiter-Pluto relationship also. So there's something about, that piercing into the larger, because in that sense, I think of Jupiter and Pluto together as being the void, the big deep void in which all of it is contained, that which we might not be able to fully perceive.
Well, Jupiter is the sky god.
Right.
So even though in astrology we relate that planet to fire and water, in mythology he's the sky god.
And
And
in
because you brought
esoteric.
up Pluto, making me think about that in terms of Pluto, the underworld, and there was a third one who am I? Oh, Saturn. Well, Saturn was the
Terrestrial.
Earth. Yeah, yeah.
Very much
And
about the physical. And then Jupiter's also the esoteric ruler of Aquarius. So, there's this very interesting I mean, I
how
think
does explain that to me? How Jupiter is in?
so Jupiter on the esoteric level is what they call the second ray, and it's about love, wisdom. So it's this higher love, higher wisdom, this understanding of all that is. The only other planet that is that is the sun, and the sun's being, kind of a higher octave. And so when you think about it from that standpoint, and also whenever I've been around like people with Jupiter in Aquarius, there's this really, I think a profound acceptance of the range of expression possible in humanity. Because you talked tonight just a little bit ago, it's almost Taoist, right? I mean, it's this idea that we come as fragments from some greater all that is, with like almost in a way simply the simple rule of go forth and experience. I mean, I think in some ways we can look at our lives and we can say, that it goes that we made these choices, but did we? I mean, because I think life has this subtle way of like almost like a pinball machine where it kind of taps you this way and taps you that way and it moves you. And like when you look back, you think, oh my God, how could I have done anything else but that? But when you were in the middle of choosing that, it seemed like there was a world of options available to you, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's, I think, very Aquarian too. It's like, this thing is like, that's what I think is gonna be really interesting is we're gonna get to see this whole range of what it is that's possible. But what is your right possible? What is your, what is your right mutant expression? What is your right unique archetypal expression? Like you said, Taurus and Mars are itching over there from, Uranus and Mars are itching over there from Taurus, waking up, Aquarius saying, hey, you guys, let's create a new form. This old form is not serving a lot of people on the planet right now.
Yes, and many people are recognizing that as well. But the whole thing of the rays and the universal love also makes me think too about bringing up the opposite sign of Leo. Leo, you know, is about the love, and the love of the inner child, the love of one, that makes one be able to be a creative being. And then Aquarius, the opposite sign, is really a love of humanity, there's the universal love issue there. And I think of the Sabian symbols, like the first symbol The original is this an old adobe mission, that's crumbling and in ruins. And Martin Goldsmith has a schoolhouse with the teacher ringing the bell outside, to have children come in. And there's this whole idea that um, the things that we humans can create have the potential is there. The potential is, okay, this was one, the mission. This was one system for some kinds of ideas and perspectives, cultural perspectives can flourish, and maybe a new one can arise now, something that's even more encompassing than the old one. And the schoolhouse too, with educate, what does education do but bring out our potential for who we can become incarnate?
Well, the interesting thing is on the esoteric, it's the sun is also the ruler of Leo. So Leo has this understanding of like, which is also the sun is, like I said, is second ray. So it's about love. They both signs, Aquarius and Leo, also are of fifth ray, which is about concrete intelligence. So it's like it's bringing in with those two signs, particularly, it has to do with about bringing forth the love in a way that takes the idea or the ideal and is able to make it manifest. And I think that's in a sense, like I said, I've said before, like I love Aaron Sullivan saying about, the small-minded Aquarian, the smaller, the more petty they are, and the larger the Aquarian, the larger, the more grand they are. And I'd say that with Leo too, when both of them are operating on that level that is really selfless, it's really quite, it touches many people. It's a structure that actually can help many people and isn't just, something that just helps one or two. And I think that's really beautiful.
Well, it's nice that we're talking about love because, like I said this week on the 4th, is it that, no, wait, I, I'm looking at, um, where did I see this? No, not the 4th, but the 6th of February, Venus is meeting up with Saturn. And, a- and it's, Venus, Venus and Venus in Aquarius, first of all. Venus is the planet of, we've been talking about love. And Venus is one of the planets that we highly associate. Usually we think about relationship love, that love for one's fellow man could be Venus, but it's also that love that we have for, we actually, I mean, I often make the distinction between the word love and like. And I think that Venus represents that energy when I say to people, I know I love you, and it has nothing to do with sex. And, um, and it has nothing to do with even liking how they behave. It's a way of expressing what we were talking about in terms of the universal love. And Venus with Saturn, and then next week Venus with Jupiter, especially with Jupiter, that that love has an opportunity to expand. And it makes me think about what's not just what's going on in this country, but more about this country, the administration we have, and what's being done, even though it's very difficult to get people vaccinated. I mean, that's an act of love. The people, the first responders, and even the people that, from a governmental perspective, the people in the health organizations that are involved, they're all scrambling to help to have this thing be efficient and widespread under very difficult situations. I mean, it's not perfect, but they're doing as best they can. And we know that that effort has, with the Biden administration, has been promoted with more support, more money, um, and that so much is a Venus in Saturn. the love coming from the government, love coming from our elected officials.
Social love. And, Venus will be right there between that Saturn and Jupiter. Like, how wonderful. I mean, that is really our structure, our law, our, everything about that. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what kind of laws get passed. I know he's been busy signing a lot of executive orders. So you as a native Sun, Venus, Mercury, and Aquarius, what do what would you say about what should people expect with Venus and Aquarius? What have you found about it over the years?
Um,
Or when she lives
well,
there?
one of the things I found about it, it's really interesting because I've had Aquarius like you. You're one of them. I've had Aquarius friends, and I had an intimate relationship with an Aquarian who I yes, whom I will.
Aquarians have intimate relationships? Is that possible?
All right. No, I mean, it's somebody in my life whom we've separated, but I will never forget him. And one of the things that I remember in a conversation was very similar to this, although he was an astrologer, but he knew his chart and all of that. And it was like, we Aquarians never forget our friends. And that is very true.
You might not hear from them for years, but they don't forget you.
That is also very true. I know my true friends that way, actually, and I've had to tell people that sometimes because they're going, well, you never call me or something. And I said, I have friends, that I've known from my childhood. And, a couple years, 3 years, 4 years will go by and we have not communicated. And then we have the opportunity to get together or even just to talk on the phone. And it's like nothing, there was no separation. I mean, we just pick up and go with it. And it's extremely Aquarian. And I used to think everybody was that way, but they're not. Even the people that aren't Aquarians understand that to a certain degree.
Right.
They
It's a
say, oh,
great,
she's just that different person.
well, it's a great point you bring up because Mercury's retrograde now in Aquarius, and it is a good time. I mean, if you haven't, I mean, Lord knows we've all had a lot of opportunity over the last year to be, to make phone calls and things. But yeah, I mean, it's a good time to connect with people, and Aquarius is like that. It's funny. It's almost like there's a thread that just gets like left somewhere, and then at some point in the future, when it's necessary, the thread just gets picked up right where it was left off. And sometimes my Scorpio moon has a hard time with that, I have to admit, but
Your Scorpio moon has a hard time with that. That's interesting. I have Scorpio moon too, but
I know you do. Mine's in the 12th, so I don't know.
yours in the 12th. Yeah,
Maybe
so
mine's more needy.
you think the 12th house, that neediness would come into the 12th house?
No, I think it's more like probably because my moon squares Saturn. That's probably a little more where that neediness would come in
Well,
from.
my moon opposes Saturn.
Yeah, but yeah, mine's water to water. Yours is water to earth. Oh, yours, yeah.
Mine's water to earth. Yes, yes. And that mine has my in that respect, mine has much to do with my family because the behavior that I shared with you about friends, I'm the same way with my family members. And my sister is an Aquarius. I would say she's even worse than I am in that regard. and my oldest brother has Mercury in Aquarius. He's a Pisces. And this is the month, he's a February birth as well. This is the month when we try to connect, he and I. We don't always do it this month, but and basically my message, if I don't hear from him, is, are you still alive? So yeah, I mean, distance, when it comes to love, universal love is pretty much, humanitarian love. Humanitarianism springs forth out of love of one's fellow man. When it comes to love, closeness isn't necessary. Absence makes the heart grow fonder or whatever. It's not, it's, air can go anywhere. So, if you feel like, well, if I need to be there, I can get there.
And especially nowadays, like what we're doing today and what many people are doing. I mean, it's funny because we're really actually not physically that far apart, but I mean, people are doing this all around the world in ways, there's no way they'd be able to obviously get together. That's another one of the wonderful gifts with the Aquarian things. And I wonder, we're seeing a little bit of backlash with the stock, not the stock market, but like the tech companies and things, and kind of a little bit of regulation, Saturn and Aquarius. And it's going to be interesting to see, if maybe some new forms and new structures of ways of communicating and connecting with one another might come forth as well. I'm still waiting for
Well,
teleportation devices.
well, the interesting thing when you brought, like the stock market up, and I was thinking of
Mm.
GameStop, and interestingly enough, a game. I mean, that's a Leo thing. And so there's the Aquarius opposite saying, wait a minute, is this technology, are we getting out of balance here? Is this going a little too far on the air side with these guys who, using their brains?
And it's funny kind of when you think about it too, because it's like there's a group of individuals who want to support the GameStop in existing and staying as a brick and mortar and a real business. And then these hedge fund idea guys who are like, oh, they're banking on the idea of it, right? So here's like, because it's like also, it's like when corn started being traded as not a food product anymore, but a commodity because they were making ethanol, for fuel. That changes the whole dynamic of what corn means. It's no longer just an inexpensive food for your animals. I mean, it's then becomes more expensive because you're using it for fuels in an inappropriate way. I'd say an inappropriate way, but it's this thing of, like this balancing act with it of where they're kind of rationalizing it and what they're doing. And it's like that idealization, making gasoline, making these things that we need on a daily basis into a commodity that all of a sudden can, go from one day being like, now I think they've moved on to they've moved on to silver. I think the Reddit people, right now they're going to do a hunt move with the silver market. Supposedly silver went up like I think $3 yesterday.
Whoa.
So stay tuned.
They've got nothing else to do. Learn to play the stock market.
It's funny, kind of
Off
reminds
the
me
bat
of like,
that.
did you ever
Go
see
ahead.
movie Monty Python's The Meaning of Life? There was a one part of it where it was like there was this big skyscraper corporate business that was going through like a ship through the seas, taking over other corporate businesses, and that's what it's become. It's so funny, this gobbling up of companies. And so I think it's really wonderful. This I think is an Aquarian example, bringing humanity back into the market, right?
Oh, well, I hope, I like the way you're seeing it. And you're the finance guy, so I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but
I don't
I
know.
know.
Yeah, it's too little too volatile, I think. But anyway, go ahead.
Oh no, it just reminds me of something, and I'll put it on the tape that, years ago a woman shared her information on making money on the commodities market, corn in specific. And for some reason, I have hardly looked at that material. But it's using astrological symbols. It's not attracting me. But if you're attracted to it, remind me, and I'll share it with you.
Yeah, there are a lot of people. I mean, that's what there. I know many astrologers who are dedicated to that, and there's very clear things of seeing like how silver's got like its own chart, gold has its own chart. It's very interesting. I mean, if you want, I mean, like J.P. Morgan said, it's not millionaires who have astrologers, but billionaires, as you know, it's a famous quote. It's meaning that if you want to follow the markets, and it makes sense. What astrology is a series of cycles. Aquarius is the perfect a perfect sign for the study of astrology because it loves seeing the ways in which these organizational systems fit in with one another. The great big watch or clock of time with all its gears and everything, all these planets as it's revolving through space in a spiral is a great big metronomic clock that's pulsing along with the pulse of the universe.
Right. The systems thing is very attractive. Matter of fact, I studied systems theory in graduate school. It's extremely attractive, but somehow or other, and it's just a strange thing. I'm not motivated by money, um, and yet I have a second house moon, so it's kind of a it's kind of a
Uh,
strange
Have
thing.
you made your living for the last while doing Moonwise? I think she's been your resource.
Oh, the moon. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
She's been
Yeah.
your container and home for you. I mean, in that sense of like, I know for you, like, it seems to me like you have really good home karma.
Home karma.
Yeah, like
Hmm.
like when we've talked before, like you have a good. It seems like you have an ease of finding places that are very healing and nurturing for you. That you have a long-term
Oh,
relationship.
yeah. Well, that has a lot to do with Saturn for me, and well, Saturn being a co-ruler of Aquarius. But yes, yes, that is. I was I'm I'm thinking of other karma when you say that,
Of
but we
course.
won't go into my personal karmic
Yeah,
life.
that's okay. Anything else
This
you want to say today?
I think we've hit it in an unusual way. I mean, we talk about having a topic and never, and then it goes in places that I'm going like, that's really fascinating. So thank you.
Oh, actually, I wanted to add one more thing. Like, I think it fits in with what you were talking about. There's a show on, I'm pretty sure it's on Amazon. It might be on Netflix, but it's called Superhuman. And I think the gentleman you were talking about earlier about having the NDE, the near-death experiences, is on there along with a lot of other ones. It's very fascinating because it talks about, these people, the groups like Russia did and we've done during the Cold War where people act as locators, they work as psychic locators for things. I really highly recommend it. Also very uplifting and exciting for us to see and accept as an aspect of what our humanity is, that everyone is capable of building psychic abilities and building their understandings and their sensitivities. And I think that's
Oh,
another thing I think Aquarius can help us get, those waves, the glyph is, those, I think it's like kind of in a way like our little antenna for like receiving the cosmic
right.
waves.
Our education system has not dealt with it's only dealt with the rational mind. And I know over the years there have been educational psychologists who have suggested, hey, we need to address other aspects of humans. And there are schools that are doing that, but it's not mainstream universal yet. And I chalk that up to Neptune Pluto cycle,
Hmm.
which the cycle they're in, it's a like a 500-year cycle, something like that. And it began at the end of the 19th century with the public school system being started on the East Coast. And because before that there were schools, but there wasn't this whole system. And they're still in the crescent phase. Neptune's doing this in and out sextile to Saturn. For a while there, it was a
Yeah.
septile, 51 degrees. Now it's about 55-ish, around in there, degrees away from Pluto. So we haven't even come to the first quarter square. And when we do, and I've forgotten, I think I did look it up, but it's been a while. Forgotten. It's not. I won't be alive unless something very unusual happens.
Might have to
Or
pick the year.
maybe we'll come back to be part of the change or the shift. But that's when we're really going to see some huge shifts if human life survives on this planet. And that's a big if. I mean, I I ponder, what the future will be like for humans on the planet. But that's it for today. Thank you very much, Michael. And all of you that are watching this, don't, if you just are tuning in for the first time on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. That we'd love to see that, you're enjoying what the two of us are sharing. And you can reach me, Merrylin LeBlanc, at merrylinleblanc@gmail.com. I have a website, moonwiseastrology.com. I do Moonwise once a week on ksfr.org. And that's the live, well, it's not always live these days, but it's at 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time um, on Saturdays. But there are podcasts, and they are also available at ksfr.org under their program tab. Michael?
Anyone who wants to learn astrology for free, I mean, download Merrylin's podcast with all of us who have been on it over the years, and you, a person can really come away with quite a wonderful understanding about astrology. You can find me at michael@cormichael.com or email me at michael@cormichael.com. Thank you so much for checking. Like us, share with your friends, leave us comments, ask us questions. Thanks for joining us, and have a great week.
Okay, bye.